Hello, everyone. Jake Klein back in your feeds once more for a new episode of Pathway to the Podium. It's been a very eventful few days in sports biz, so I thought for this episode, we'll go over some news and notes. These are going to come at you fast and furious, perhaps too fast, too furious. What's old is new again in the NBA. The Spurs and Knicks, two teams most would agree are far ahead of schedule team-building-wise, are in the NBA Finals. For San Antonio, it's the first time since 2014 when they defeated the Heat. Knicks fans have had a much longer wait, some 27 years. Ironically, that 1999 Finals was also against the Spurs, which San Antonio won. The Knicks title drought dates back to over half a century. Another old but new thing, which I'm sure anyone watching the series immediately noticed, the return of the large Larry O'Brien trophy logo to the center of the court. Nature is healing. It's strange to think about this, but the trophy decal at center court lasted only 5 years, from 2005 to 2009. And after 17 long years, this classic look is back, and I, for one, am quite pleased that it is. Look, presentation matters. A person who knows the absolute bare minimum about the sport should turn on the game and realize it's a championship. Heck, up until this year, the NBA Cup, frankly, had more pageantry than the NBA Finals, which, of course, doesn't really sit right. But credit where credit's due. The league listened to the fans' desires and admitted the error of their ways, and they remedied it. It took a while, but they still did it. Now, despite what New Yorkers might think, the Knicks do not have the same national appeal as the Lakers, or the Yankees for that matter. But still, NYC is the #1 TV market, and it's going to over-index enormously. So that's a huge win for ABC. But the bigger draw nationally really is Victor Wembanyama, who in just 3 years has arguably become the face of the NBA. He is enthralling and absurdly talented in so many aspects of the game. He is the cheat code. And he is so driven. His determination to win and rigorous work ethic make him all the more likable, traits which, to be quite frank, many players in this generation's NBA appear to lack. And whether that's true or not, that's the stigma the league has struggled to overcome in recent years. But this guy just gets it. Time after time, I hear a soundbite from him, and I'm just nodding along. You couldn't have a better ambassador for the game. And it seems almost everyone who even remotely follows the sport knows that. Wemby's stardom could not come at a better moment for the league or its media partners. He is a TV ratings and digital engagement turbo engine. Now, all that I just said, that had been the main narrative, at least before the series tipped off. But now, as the series pauses for several days, the story first and foremost has been the resolve of the Knicks, overcoming a 14-point deficit in Game 1 and then coming in clutch after squandering a sizable lead in Game 2. New York has flipped the series on its head. They appear unflappable. They now take a commanding 2-0 lead back to Madison Square Garden, and they are the third team in NBA Finals history to win the first 2 games on the road. Think about that. Saying a team or player is carrying a city on their back is an overused expression in sports, but it feels truly applicable here. Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, and the rest of the team are locked in, and when it matters the most, they are delivering. They also have found ways to limit Wemby, and despite singing his praises about a moment ago, it appears that Wembanyama may not be ready for this biggest stage. The biggest story now is whether the Knicks can end a 53-year title drought. I have never seen this city this alive. People are flooding the streets, the bars are packed, and anyone not in front of a television is glued to their phone following the action. And this is when their team, remember, is on the road. They've yet to play any home games here for the finals. The viewership numbers for Game 1 are already out. It's nearly 17 million. That is the most watched NBA game since 2019. It's the largest Game 1 NBA Finals audience since 2018 and the 5th largest in the last quarter century. Of course, Nielsen caveats abound, but no matter how you slice it, this is a very strong number. By the way, this would be the first time in 56 years that there's no NBA Finals game scheduled for Sunday. Game 5 is set for Saturday, which is just the second time since 1981 that a Finals game is scheduled for that day. Some of these changes can be attributed to the start of the FIFA World Cup. Worth noting, Pat McAfee will be hosting an altcast of Game 3 at Madison Square Garden. That's June 8th, and it would be on ESPN. President Trump says he intends to be at that game and potentially also Game 4. So who knows? Maybe POTUS will make an appearance on the McAfee broadcast. It's certainly possible. Remember as well, the UFC Freedom 250 event at the White House is June 14th, which coincides with Flag Day and Trump's 80th birthday. With the FIFA World Cup about to commence, expect Trump to go at least to one of those matches as well. The Pat McAfee Show just announced a partnership with DraftKings. This is notable given that DraftKings is the exclusive official sportsbook and odds provider of ESPN, which of course simulcasts 2 hours of the show every weekday. McAfee also is in early discussions to extend his deal with ESPN, even though it doesn't expire for another 2 years. Now, these two bits of news do not seem coincidental to me. More on McAfee a little later. The College Football Playoff announced the game times and kickoffs for the December 2026 through January 2027 postseason. Once again, there are partially overlapping windows between the CFP and NFL. On Saturday, December 19th, there are CFP first-round games which kick off at 3:30 and 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. At 5 p.m., Fox has the Seahawks at the Eagles in a matchup between the two most recent Super Bowl champions. Then at 8:20 p.m., CBS has the viewership drivers, the Bears and the Bills. Unsurprisingly, TNT, which is licensing CFP games from ESPN, gets the games that will be cannibalized here. ESPN keeps the best windows for themselves, naturally. There are some who say the NFL should give deference to college football's postseason, particularly on Saturdays, as the tradition has been college football's natural day. I frankly think that mentality is somewhat absurd. If I'm the NFL, there's no way I'm conceding anything whatsoever to college football. That weekend, by the way, falls outside the window of protection offered by the Sports Broadcasting Act. So there's nothing stopping the NFL from scheduling games on that date, nothing whatsoever. The NFL is by far the superior product. The responsibility falls on college football leaders and broadcast partners to get creative. Having overlapping windows hurts college football far more than it does the league. So it's then up to college football to find workarounds. Of course, right now there's ample talk of a potential expansion to a 24-team playoff, a concept which, remember, not that long ago appeared dead on arrival, but now has gained significant momentum. It very much feels we are once again in a lame duck period of the CFP. A quick footnote, the exact order of the January 1 quarterfinal bowls has yet to be determined. It's going to be the Peach Bowl, Cotton Bowl, and Rose Bowl on that day, but the time slots of noon, 4 p.m., and 8 p.m. Eastern have yet to be assigned. This means, in theory, the Rose Bowl can move off its coveted made-for-TV sunset time and instead be played in prime time Eastern. We have to see if that actually happens. Sports Media Watch, by the way, has confirmed that under the current CFP contract, neither the Rose Bowl nor the Fiesta Bowl will air in the noon Eastern window, which is 9 or 10 a.m. local. It's bullshitting season once again, though to be fair, it feels like it always is these days. Here's some narratives I found particularly funny. Let's start with this Myles Garrett trade, an absolute blockbuster as the heavily favored Los Angeles Rams get one of the true game changers the league has today. The soft spot in the Rams last season was their defense, and adding Garrett along with the ex-Chiefs duo of Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson earlier this offseason directly addresses that weakness. And now there's some talk that the Rams are so stacked that Aaron Donald might be compelled to come out of retirement and help the franchise earn another title. The Browns in return get Jared Verse, a very solid player, by the way, plus a 2027 round 1 pick, a 2028 round 2, and a 2029 round 3. This unquestionably is a seismic move, which further tilts things in favor of a clear Super Bowl contender that is the Los Angeles Rams. But let's not pretend Garrett leaving Cleveland wasn't foreseeable. The Browns essentially telegraphed they were open to trade offers for Garrett when both sides agreed to modify his contract back in March. The team pushed about $10 million in guarantees from March to a week before the start of the regular season in September. Reports, which of course the Browns themselves most likely pushed out through direct or indirect channels, downplayed the significance of that contractual change, acting as if it were business as usual. Cleveland GM Andrew Berry called Myles Garrett, quote, a career Brown. But no matter what they said publicly, clearly the Browns was setting the stage, creating the right conditions for a trade. And that's exactly what they did in June. Similarly, with the A.J. Brown trade, NFL insiders kept pushing the narrative that the front offices of Philadelphia and New England had not fully agreed on terms, that it was pens down, and they would work out the particulars after June 1 at 4 p.m., at which point Philadelphia could split their dead cap hit over 2 seasons instead of just one for Brown. Now, of course, nothing is done until it's completely done, but reporters, probably to liven discussion and debate, adamantly refuted any notion that all the parameters of the deal were already agreed upon. Now, obviously, this wasn't the case. Obviously, both teams knew exactly what the exchange would be. Mere minutes after 4 p.m. on June 1, the terms of the trade broke. What a surprise. It's readily apparent both sides had the deal fully worked out, probably at least a month, if not more so, in advance. But instead, we get this fiction stuffed down our throats. So let's recap the trade in full. Brown goes to the Patriots. In return, the Eagles get a first-round pick and a fifth-round pick. Now, that fifth-round pick is in the 2027 draft and is the higher of the 2 fifth-rounders the Patriots have. What's particularly interesting is the first-round pick that was exchanged. It's for 2028, not 2027. Now, typically teams value picks more the closer they are to now than later. The general thinking is everything else being equal, next year's pick is worth more than a pick 2 or 3 years away. It essentially kind of parallels the time value of money concept to an extent. But if I'm the Eagles, getting a 2028 first rounder instead of a 2027 first round pick isn't the worst thing. In fact, it might actually be better for them. Now, I don't want to harp on this too much, but Jalen Hurts' future with the Eagles is very much in question. It is kind of ironic given he got Philly a ring and led them to another Super Bowl. But the offense as a whole has taken a significant step back since they hoisted that Lombardi. Debate shows have generated a ton of content on this particular subject, arguing over the exact attribution of blame, the quarterback, the head coach, the OC, etc. Jalen is accustomed to having new offensive coordinators. It's a staple of his collegiate and professional career. But Sean Mannion's scheme might be the greatest adjustment Hurts has ever had to make. Regardless of where you stand, 2026 and 2027 are very big years for Hurts. Jalen's contract runs through 2028. He also importantly has a no-trade clause, which of course he could elect to waive. If the organization decides to not extend Hurts this year, that additional first-round pick could be used to trade up the draft board for a highly touted draft prospect. Barring a complete catastrophe of a 2026 season, Hurts is going to be on the Eagles roster come 2027. But if he doesn't meet expectations in 2026 and 2027, that extra 2028 first-rounder comes in particularly handy for acquiring a new quarterback. And yes, the 2027 draft class is expected to be absolutely loaded with talent. We've heard this time and again. But even if the Eagles received a 2027 first-rounder from the Patriots, it wouldn't do too much for Philly. There are so many teams that are better positioned and have more dry powder to move to the top of the 2027 draft. It would be foolish for Philadelphia to even try securing a top 5 pick in 2027, as they are simply going to be outbid. Tennis great Serena Williams officially declared she's coming out of retirement and will play professional tennis once more. The 23-time individual Grand Slam winner, now aged 44, comes back after nearly 4 years since saying she was evolving and moving away from the sport. This should have been huge news, but it was largely muted because it had already been expected. Back in the beginning of December, she re-entered the International Tennis Integrity Agency and World Anti-Doping Agency's anti-doping testing pool. This immediately ignited rumors that she was planning to end her retirement. But Serena vehemently and repeatedly denied she had any intention of making a return. Well, why else would you do it? These testing protocols, while necessary and absolutely vital to the integrity of the sport, are also kind of a pain to deal with, particularly the daily whereabout requirement. You wouldn't choose to do this unless if you were coming back. Still, the denials persisted. The rules now require 6 months of testing before you can be deemed eligible to play professionally. And surprise, surprise, June comes around 6 months later, and Williams announces her return. Now, I think it's great Serena is coming back, but it would have been nice and would have been a far more exciting story if she had got out in front of this back in December. I think her PR team kind of mishandled that a bit. So in each of these cases, the Garrett trade, the Brown trade, and Serena coming out of retirement, when you see smoke, there's a fire. The adage remains true. Actions speak louder than words. Never forget that. In other news, Russell Wilson has retired from the NFL, concluding a 14-year professional career. The 10-time Pro Bowler took the Seattle Seahawks to 2 Super Bowls, winning one of them and would have won a second were it not for Malcolm Butler's goal line pick. Wilson, remember, was one of the earlier and prominent examples of a college football player using the graduate transfer rule when he switched from NC State to Wisconsin. That move paid off extremely well for him, and he was drafted by Seattle in the 3rd round in 2012. Wilson now moves to television, joining CBS's The NFL Today, alongside host James Brown and Nate Burleson and Bill Cowher. Matt Ryan, of course, is now leading the Atlanta Falcons front office, so it makes sense for CBS to bring him on as a new quarterback voice. Also coming on full-time to the show is Kyle Long, who has been with the network since 2020, having served in both studio and game analyst roles across CBS Sports platforms, appearing on shows such as the NFL Today Plus and that other pregame show. Kyle's father, Pro Football Hall of Fame member Howie Long, has of course been part of Fox's NFL studio show since its inception all the way back in 1994. So it's pretty cool. Father and son will now be directly competing against one another in the exact same TV window. NBC, likewise, this offseason has added talent, with longtime former Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin joining Football Night in America. So with Kyle Long, remember, that is a promotion. He's already proven he can do television. But Russell Wilson and Mike Tomlin, they are newcomers. I recently posed this question on social media of which of the two brings more to the table. And what I mean by that, I don't mean just X's and O's, but also the charisma and name recognition, which are just as important when it comes to television. Jimmy Traina of Sports Illustrated weighed in and said Wilson brings more star power given the casual viewer is probably aware he's married to Ciara, while Tomlin brings more credibility given his long coaching tenure. We've, of course, seen both of them at the podium aplenty, answering questions to the media. Wilson tends to come off a bit more robotic, and while Tomlin has a lot of funny and viral quotes, a lot of those kind of feel pre-planned, at least to some extent. Of course, with studio work, analysts are not reacting to plays in real time like commentators do. They have plenty of time to compose their thoughts. So, whether Wilson and Tomlin come off differently in their new settings will be worth keeping an eye on once the season gets underway. Quarterback Caleb Williams has been named the cover of Madden 27. He is the first Bears player to land the coveted front of the video game franchise. It should be noted, though, Brian Urlacher was on NFL 2K3. The Madden 27 Standard Edition cover recreates Caleb's now famous jump pass, while also paying homage to Michael Jordan. The Deluxe Edition cover depicts his Iceman celebration. Caleb, of course, has a significantly low completion percentage from 2025, but remember, Michael Vick did as well, and frankly throughout his entire career, and he still made the cover of Madden 2004, so it's not that much of an anomaly. The Bears, by the way, have 7 standalone games this upcoming season, including 5 in primetime, but they are not doing an international game this year. EA, remember, is in the process of going private, getting acquired by a consortium led by Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, Silver Lake, and Affinity Partners in a deal valued around $55 billion. In TV news, Hugh Laurie is doubling down on John le Carré. He is joining the BBC and Amazon-owned MGM Plus's new series Legacy of Spies, which has Succession alum Matthew McFadyen playing George Smiley. Laurie's role, as of this recording, is unspecified. He also stars in another le Carré adaptation, The Night Manager. Amazon got the global TV rights, excluding the UK, to The Night Manager after season 1 aired on AMC way back in 2016. A decade later, they revived the show, so having both these series under the same corporate umbrella probably helped ease this process along for Laurie. A couple of Jake's takes for you now. The 2025 to 2026 academic and athletic schedule is coming to an end. The spring championships for NCAA sports are well underway, some having already concluded. The lacrosse finals were held over Memorial Day weekend, and Texas just won its second straight Women's College World Series. Meanwhile, baseball is currently at the super regional stage of their tournament. If you look at the past 5-10 years for these two sports in particular, ESPN has made a concerted effort to showcase these competitions, allocating more TV windows and shorter programming to college softball and baseball. And the same can be said as well for the network's approach to gymnastics in the winter. But one sport's absence particularly stands out: college tennis. Although ESPN has the rights to the entire tournament, only the men's and women's finals was shown on linear TV, and that was on ESPNU, and it was tape delayed. The rest of the matchups were exclusive to streaming. Now look, I get it. ESPN has a lot of sports rights. It's literally impossible to put them all on traditional TV. And it's great that there's at least a streaming option for fans who want to watch college tennis. But college tennis, this sport, deserves higher billing. It shouldn't be pushed aside to some nebulous corner of the streaming world, out of sight and out of mind. Tennis participation in the United States continues to climb. Here's some numbers for you. The USTA's 2026 report shows that in 2025, 27.3 million Americans aged 6 or older played tennis at least once that year. That's an increase of 1.6 million from 2024. In other words, about 1 of every 12 Americans are playing tennis. Women participants increased by 1.1 million year over year, representing 10% growth. This is clearly an expanding market. So, ESPN, I implore you, put more college tennis on. Not only has the sport shown it deserves to be at the table, but you'll likely benefit from having it on as well, as people will clearly watch it. You're already paying for the rights, so why not actually show it? In the previous pod, I said no one is better at getting guests than Pat McAfee. Well, a week and a half ago, his superpower was on full display, perhaps to its fullest extent yet, as he secured interviews with the commissioners of the NBA, NHL, MLB, WNBA, MLS, and UFC on very short notice. The pre-recorded interviews were then shown as a primetime ESPN special, filling the time slot that would have been Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals had the Knicks not utterly obliterated the Cavaliers in a 4-game sweep. McAfee asked each of the commissioners about the current state and future outlook of their respective leagues, presenting them essentially with the same 3 questions. What's going right? What keeps you up at night? And what does the future look like? Now, admittedly, most of the commissioners spoke in pretty general terms, eschewing any specifics, sidestepping mostly. Adam Silver was by far the most effusive. The NBA commissioner told Pat the league is looking to adopt tennis-type Hawkeye technology to instantly review out-of-bounds calls. So, just like in tennis, when the technology can tell whether a ball landed in or out, similarly in basketball, that technology would be able to spot a ball or player going out of bounds, or whether a player was or was not standing behind the three-point line when they attempted a shot. Silver did not specify a timetable for when we could expect this new system to debut, but one would have to think, before it's rolled out in all 30 arenas across the NBA, there would be a testing period, perhaps at Summer League. This all begs the question, why hasn't this technology been adopted sooner across the major U.S. sports leagues for similar out-of-bound rulings? Like I said, Hawkeye has been utilized by tennis for many years with electronic line calling. Even Wimbledon, perhaps the Grand Slam most steeped in tradition, has turned to it. Though it should be said Roland Garros, aka the French Open, still uses line judges, to the chagrin of nearly all the players and fans. But they are the exception. To be fair, more and more we are seeing sports leagues remove the human element from clear in-out calls. After a trial run in the minors, Major League Baseball implemented ABS this year, giving the player at bat the ability, albeit in a limited capacity, to challenge whether the pitch was thrown in or outside the strike zone. Soccer for some time now has had some form of goal line technology and semi-automated offside. The NFL, starting in 2025, relies on technology for line-to-gain measurements, not to spot the ball, mind you. Instead, what it does is it essentially replaces the role the chain gang had. So, sport as a whole has shown a willingness to turn to technology for lots of different officiating purposes, though it still seems to be happening at a pretty slow pace. Now, I understand the desire for caution to not get too far ahead of our skis here. I respect that. But it's high time we stop dipping our toes and instead dive in here. This is where the NBA can push the Overton window. It shouldn't be much of a financial or logistic impediment to install the cameras needed for Hawkeye, particularly for NBA arenas, which of course are also indoors. The software and AI abilities are of course already in place. The benefits here would be huge. You're far more likely to get the call right and complete the review faster. And with sports betting and prediction markets playing a larger role, any way to lessen controversy or suspicion of dubious officiating is an added benefit. With the NBA at the forefront of the Big Four U.S. sports here, it would only spur on the other leagues to likewise lean more heavily on Hawkeye or some sort of Hawkeye equivalent. I'm thinking about the NFL here in particular. We're over a quarter of the way through the 21st century. At this point, we really should be able to definitively know whether a ball crossed the goal line. If we could track player movement using advanced metrics, why can't we do the same thing with the ball? It's kind of mind-numbing. And for lesser-used venues, such as stadiums which host international games, which would only host maybe 1 or up to maybe 3 games a year, maybe some exceptions can be made for those stadiums. Maybe they don't use this technology because it would be a little more burdensome to them. But for the 30 NFL stadiums, it's time for an upgrade. Far past time, really. Back to ABS and Major League Baseball for a quick second. I honestly hate it, but it's not for the reason you might think. If you scroll across social media, you see all these posts and all these articles lauding how they just love this for some reason. They will mention how exciting it is to prove the umpire wrong, the anticipation right before the call is announced, the drama that comes with it. But see, therein lies the rub for me. I don't want to wait about half a minute for the review to occur. the player challenges, there's a brief discussion with the umpire, the review that occurs, the call is announced. It takes a lot of time and it adds up quickly. And this is a sport which, remember, really made an emphasis really on speeding up the game. If the tech is available to deem whether it's a ball or strike, then just let ABS do its thing. Every call should come from ABS and be automatic. All right, that's the whole point of ABS. It should take 1 to 2 seconds maximum. Under the current format, it's similar to sending an email on dial-up internet, waiting for the whooshing sound to occur when we have the ability to just instant message one another. Does anyone enjoy watching a video buff? Does anyone enjoy watching the frustration and the anxiety that comes with the circle of doom waiting for something to load? No, we don't. I want things done instantaneously as anyone who lives in the year 2026. And we have the ability to do that. And I don't understand why we're not doing it here. No more half measures. Take the ball strike determination entirely out of the umpire's hands. And to be clear here, I'm not calling for umpires to lose their jobs. There are plenty of other responsibilities umpires have in overseeing this game. They are still very instrumental to making sure everything operates smoothly. But for this particular thing, let technology take over. When it comes down to it, all calls in sports are subjective. It's a simple, undeniable fact. But the most objective of the subjective is whether a ball or puck or foot or what have you is inside or outside some boundary. There are countless areas where the human element is still a necessity when it comes to officiating. Was that grab enough to constitute a hold? Was that a charge? Was that a flop? Tech has not yet caught up to that, and it might not for a while. The human eye, while miraculous, is still very limited. Tech here would do a far better job with these particular kind of calls. Any in and out call whatsoever should be automated at this point. No exceptions. That concludes this episode. Thank you so much for listening. As a reminder, in case you missed any recent entries, the last 5 guests that have been on, the Sport Profile host, Dylan Manfrey, surveying the Sports Emmys race, CBS Sports NFL analyst JP Acosta covering the hot topics of the NFL offseason, Formula One commentator Nelson Valkenburg telling us what it's like being inside the booth calling an F1 race, Grinding the Mocks creator Benjamin Robinson using analytics to predict NFL draft outcomes, and Ticket Talk founder Scott Friedman highlighting the many difficulties ticket purchasers have these days for premium events. Please subscribe, follow, and like this podcast on social media. Video episodes of this pod are available on both Twitter/X and YouTube. On Twitter, that's Jake A. Klein, that is JakeAKline, and at Pathway to the Pod. On YouTube, that's at Pathway to the Podium Pod. You can also follow on Instagram and TikTok, which is the same handle, Pathway to the Podium. As always, I'm Jake Klein, and as always, I appreciate you for watching and listening. We're going to have some really cool World Cup content coming on later this month, so please stay tuned for that. Until next time.